Okay, great. Now I hit the start webinar button. Hi, everybody. I am Blake Cabot. I am the owner of careerlearning.com. And I have the all too fabulous Wendy Sellers. And we're going to be talking about DEI program changes, which is topical and in the news. And so Wendy has a great deal of experience. She's been a HR operations consultant for 25 years. She's a consultant, advisor, educator, author. She's SHRM certified, SPHR certified, internal investigation administrator, DISC certified, et cetera, et cetera. So Wendy has done it all. She's seen it all. She's been it all. And today, without further ado, one other thing. We should, if anybody, we have obviously a class coming up. Wendy has a lot of classes on here, but we're going to have a DEI class coming up in a couple weeks. So keep tuned for that. And we have a code called Professional 20. If you buy anything on careerlearning.com, you get 20% off. And in terms of Zoom, if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A or in chat, and I will ask Wendy. So with that said, Wendy, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. And yes, I actually calculated the other day, almost 30 years of experience, which means I'm old. I've seen it all. I've done it all. And I have to say, since, I'll just say a couple of years ago, especially since COVID, things change fast in the HR land now, and we're here again, talking about something that we didn't think was ever going to be discussed or removed from the federal government, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So we're only here today for a short session of time, but I want to go over as quick as possible. So put on your seatbelt. This is going to be very fast paced. I want to go over as quick as possible just kind of what's going on in the DEI world and then what you can do about it. And then, like Blake said, we're going to be doing a longer session, possibly a 2-day session on kind of like the top happenings in HR, and diversity and equity and inclusion, accessibility and belonging is one of them, but there's so many other things going on as well. So with that said, recently, the executive order that is related to affirmative action was revoked. So that came around in 1965. It was just revoked in 2025. What the heck was affirmative action, and how is that related to DEI? So affirmative action was this executive order, and it basically said if you are a federal contractor, so if you as a company get money from the federal government for your projects or your services or your products, then you have to affirm, which means positively take action to help correct past discrimination. And that also stood still for the subcontractors as well. So there's a federal contractor, subcontractor of the federal contractor, and at some point it stops so that not every subcontractor needed it. It's neither here or there. I've been in that world. It was complicated to it wasn't super complicated. If you were first time you're ever in affirmative action, you're like, what do I do? But the bottom line is, it just basically made you as the company start tracking, information. Who did we hire? Where did we hire them from? What is their personal characteristics? You had to give reports, and there was timelines and goals. Now, there's all this drama in the news, and listen to the news, which half of the time, because they're there to make clicks. They're there to make money. They're talking about quotas. Okay, there's no more quotas. We're going to be focused on merit. There was never, ever, ever any quotas in affirmative action. In fact, under U.S. law, quotas of hiring people from certain categories, those quotas were and are considered illegal still to this day, and never were a part of a legitimate affirmative action plan. People that didn't like that used the word quotas, but they were 100% incorrect. So affirmative action really it aimed to achieve diversity by considering factors like race, gender, and religion as part of the evaluation process, and never mandated specific numbers. Every single organization had to do their own analysis and say, okay, how can I help change the demographics of my organization? Maybe I need to start recruiting somewhere else, in addition to where I'm recruiting now. Maybe I need to start thinking outside the box. Well, this mandate has all been gone. It's gone away. So I think we're at or near the time period where when it was announced about the relocation, there was a waiting period, and I'm pretty sure we're there now. So if you were affirmative action, you don't have to do that anymore. Now, there are issues with the EEOC's website and with the ADA website and a bunch of other government websites right now, where if you still have to upload reports and things like that, don't know what's going to happen there, because some of those websites, when you're clicking on them, there's 404 errors. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that soon. Now, what I also wanted to clarify today is there's rumors in the news. Again, certain news are there for entertainment and for clicks and to make money, not really there to give you the facts. So, equal employment opportunity is the law. It is still the law today. The president cannot change that. Only Congress can change that. Can he convince Congress to change it? That's a whole other conversation. But Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1964 is still the law. It prohibits discrimination in hiring and workplace practices for or against certain races, religion, sex, national origin. It establishes legal protections not only for employees, but for candidates too. And so if you don't know enough about the EEOC, I'm sure you do, but there's the link right there that you can click on. I did want to say also that it's not just about the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, which is part of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that oversees that. It's all the other acts too that you need to worry about. So, for example, what's not included in the EEOA from 1964 is pregnancy. And so we now have another law called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which has been a long time coming, and we needed that a long time ago. So you still have to pay attention to all of the laws. So I really do want you to make sure that you're coming back to a training if you're new in HR, or if you're the business owner or a manager and you don't have HR and therefore you're wearing the HR hat. Come back to one of our trainings and make sure that you understand all of the laws that employers have to comply with. To throw another thing in the ring here, it depends on where you're located. So there's federal law, which we all have to comply with, and then there's state laws. And so state laws have to comply with federal law, and they can go above and beyond those. So for purposes of explaining that, let's just say there was no other, laws outside of race, religion, sex, or national origin. A state could then create a law saying, okay, now we're going to protect, XYZ, whatever that might be, sexual orientation, etc. And many states did that. But then we finally, in the middle of the COVID period, got a law called sexual orientation and gender identity. And so now that's part of federal law too. So again, these laws cannot be changed by the president. They can only be changed by Congress. These are not executive orders. These are actual laws, and they still are in place. So it depends on how big you are as an employer of what you have to follow. For the most part, if you have 15 employees or more in the United States somewhere, you must comply with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission laws. So all the laws that under the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So the one that I just talked about, the EEOA from 1964, all the Title VII laws, ADA, and then there's so many more. Plus, you may also have to comply with different laws that your state or states operate in. Now, you could see here, there's one little law, or it's a big law, but a little exception here is it for the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, that's actually 20 employees or more that you have to comply with. So this is a very, 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 very high level overview here, folks. There are so many laws and it's so complicated. I would encourage you, instead of trying to be a lawyer, I would really encourage you to connect with an employment attorney in your state and in your industry, because there are many industry specific laws that you may need to comply with as well. And then there's OSHA, safety laws, and then states have their own version of OSHA too. So, there's all these crazy laws we have to comply with. Now, let's get back to the topic at hand, which is, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what the heck is this? If you weren't mandated under affirmative action, you may not even have D&I, DEI in your policies, in your programs, but you may be thinking, can I? What can I do? So we'll get to that in a minute. So So diversity, it's the presence of difference within a given setting, in this case, the workplace. Inclusion has to do with people, different identities, different personal characteristics, feeling and or being valued, leveraged, and welcome within a given setting, in this case, the workplace, or possibly the entire industry. Now, diversity and inclusion are outcomes of your actions. Equity is not an outcome. Equity, the E in the traditional DEI sense, refers to the process of an organization engaging into actions to ensure that the people that they work with, the people that they hire, the people that they want to hire, if they have marginalized identities who were discriminated against in the past, they say, we want to be an equitable organization and we're going to do everything we can to help people, our candidates and our employees with marginalized identities, grow, contribute, and develop. And I'm telling you, it was and still is very, very, very hard to achieve. I used to work with federal contractors. I still do in a different sense now. I mostly do training and advisory. But, when I was in corporate HR and we started getting federal contracts and had to start complying with affirmative action, and then proving that, okay, we're doing things differently to hire people from different identities that we haven't hired in the past and to help them grow. It was hard. The equity thing was basically putting all of society's wrongs onto the employer. And I personally didn't think that was the right thing, but I was in it to win it, to say, yeah, let's do the right thing. Here's the thing that I want to tell you is when I was with that company, it was an architectural engineering firm, very, very specific niche in engineering and architecture. And there's only about maybe 12 to 15 colleges in the United States that taught that specific degree at that time. And then when we were forced to use affirmative action and think outside the box, all of those colleges, by the way, not all of them, but majority of them, I would say, was 90% white men, right? And so we were like, okay, we now have to think outside the box and start diversifying our organization. Affirmative action forced us to do that, which we didn't like, by the way. But it turns out it 100% improved the outcomes of our organization, and the retention of those employees was way longer than the retention of the original employees that we were working with. And we had very, very good employee retention. So to beat that was amazing and shocking and kind of eye-opening. Now, what I want to also throw in here is a different E, in case the equity word scares you, which I get it, is equality. So equality is treating everyone the same. So while equity is giving people what they need to be successful, specifically or if they were from marginalized identities, equality is treating everyone the same. So there's a different E that you could possibly use. So there's more terminology with the DEI. There's DEIA and DEIB, which stands for accessibility, especially for people with disabilities, whether they're short-term, long-term, permanent, temporary. And then the B is belonging, which I love. I love the diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. I love having those four initials. I personally also like equity and equality, but I do know that that scares people. And I understand if you choose to use the other terminology moving forward. But the facts are, all of this brings higher employee satisfaction. There was a Deloitte study that said organizations with inclusive cultures, just inclusive, not all the other things, are twice as likely to meet or exceed financial targets, 3 times as likely to be high performing, and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. Who the heck wouldn't want that? This suggests that inclusivity alone not only fosters a positive work environment, but also enhances overall performance. But you and your executives and your managers now need to understand what the heck does inclusivity means and what do we need to do to become more conclusive. So Blake, take note. We're going to do a training on that too in the future. All right.
Awesome.
On inclusivity alone, because that alone could bring positive results and make sure that we're, hitting financial targets, or better yet, exceeding them. So again, Deloitte, very big organization. They did this study. They also said that, and this was from bonusly.com, inclusive workplaces experience reduced turnover rates. Yay, love that. research indicates that a strong sense of belonging, the B word, leads to a 50% lower risk of employee turnover. So
Mm.
inclusivity and belonging go hand in hand together, and we'll be doing some future trainings on that too. So come back for that. Um, Finally, here from the bonusly information is employees in inclusive workplaces, they are 3 times less likely to voluntarily walk out on their job. So I don't know about you, but since COVID, recruiting has been incredibly expensive. I have a recruiter on my team, and we alone have seen so much high cost in just placing an ad online where it used to be cheap. So recruiting is expensive, recruiting is time consuming, and recruiting is exhausting. So why don't we work on keeping our employees instead of letting them walk out the door? And we can do that by focusing on inclusivity and belonging. And then also, if you're interested and get the check mark from my above of also focusing on accessibility and diversity initiatives, and then possibly equity and equality as well. It also brings, as I mentioned, a larger recruiting pool, so it makes it easier to recruit because there's less turnover. But there, you make sure if you are getting a diverse range of candidates, like I mentioned, when I started doing that by force, we were like, whoa, why didn't we think about this sooner? Why didn't we think outside the back box? Why do we need this specific degree when these degrees over here are very similar? And we could put these people with these degrees, which are not our ideal degrees, we can hire them and then put them into a fast track training program. So now they're equal or equitable, probably not equitable, but definitely equal with the rest of the individuals who have that very hard to achieve degree over there. And that's very expensive because it wasn't necessarily taught at a lot of public schools. A lot of it was private schools for that degree we were going after a while ago. So a survey here from dice.com revealed that 42% of US employees consider diversity and inclusion as important when they're selecting what company they're going to work for. So they're looking on your website, they're looking to see on your careers page, on your ad, is there a link to, about us? Look at our great culture. Look at the pictures of everybody who's diverse and it's real. They're not just fake stock pictures. Making sure to say, you know what, I want to work with the people that are diverse, not just traditional sense of diversity, but diversity of thought. Am I going to get hired and be put at a table where I'm getting asked questions and being part of solutions, or I'm going to be shoved in a little box? Now, you have to ask your candidates that. Not everybody wants to be a decision maker, and I don't blame them. But many people do say, I don't want to be a decision maker, but I want to be part of the decision. And that means diversity of thought, of asking employees, how do we change things instead of only thinking the executives have the answers? Hint, everybody needs to be involved. Committees are my favorite thing ever because you can make them short-term projects and then you can say, all right, this project's wrapped up. Thanks everybody for your opinions. We're going to go this way with this decision here. So committees are something that I absolutely love. But getting back to this conversation here of, again, DEI, DEIA, DEIB, it brings larger recruiting pools. And it also brings stronger connections with a diverse customer base. Hello, win-win. I mean, if we're spending, regardless if you're selling a service or a product, we're spending a ton of money on advertising and marketing, and it's exhausting and it's not always successful. If you can take your dollars and spend less money on marketing and sales and have your employees bragging about you all over the internet, hint, if they're not bragging about you, they're doing the opposite. You may have to motivate them to brag about you, but you do not have to motivate them to go and talk negatively about you, unfortunately. So really be looking at that in your organization. But if you do have a diverse, equitable, equal, inclusive, accessible, and belonging workforce, the customers that look like them, sound like them, believe like them, have personal characteristics like them are going to say, oh, I want to work with that company because their employees identify with me and they get me. They get me. So be loud and be proud, maybe not too loud, but be proud of, who works for you, Little caveat though is I want you to be careful about taking pictures of your employees and things like that and putting them on the internet without their permission. Be honest. Don't just put your one or two diverse people on the internet. Everyone's going to see right through that, including your employees, and they're going to be very upset. So instead of faking it or lying, make sure that you're getting diverse people in and then saying we want to take pictures of all our employees and show them on the internet, and make sure that it's all over our careers page and our customer pages too, so they can see that we do have a diverse team, all the way from accessibility to all the other personal characteristics. But this McKinsey and Company report that said that organizations in the top quartile, so the top 25% for ethnic and cultural diversity, are 36% more likely to outperform their peers. Hello, what a competitive advantage. But you do have to look into it more than that. You can't just hire people with a different, skin tone or sexual orientation or ability/disability and then think, oh, everything's suddenly going to be okay. You still need to make sure you're using them and all your employees to the best possibility that the company can, meaning getting them involved in decision making before you launch a product to somebody that may look or sound like them. This advantage, though, it really does stem from the ability, again, to connect and meets the needs of the customers. And so it's super important. I want to stress this again. Just hiring people that are diverse is not going to change anything. You have to actually get their brains involved in decision making, even if it's only, 5 to 10% of the time on a very specific item. But it drives me nuts as the HR lady when we hire really smart employees and then we stick them in a corner and we say, just do this little job over here. We don't want your opinion. That is not inclusive. That is not in belonging. That is not at all. That's just diverse, and it doesn't do a darn thing except for look good somewhere. And many of you may have done that in the past. I'm not judging, because you were forced to because of affirmative action. Well, that is gone now. Now we should be hiring diverse people, diverse mindsets, so traditional diversity and the diversity of thought, because we want to make positive changes in our organization. We want to retain not only customers, but we want to retain employees. Of course, our focus is always going to be on retaining customers first. But if we don't retain the thoughts, the minds that we hired to get those customers, the customers eventually are going to go away as well. So that's very important. Now, there's also this conversation in the news right now about merit. Oh, affirmative action is gone. Now we're only going to hire based on merit. That was always what it was. That's 100% not accurate. The claims that are in the news that saying, oh, affirmative action forced us to hire people even though they weren't qualified. Nope, they still had to be qualified. Maybe they were a little less qualified and then you had to do a training program, but looks left, looks right. Hello, welcome to 2025. If you're getting a 100% qualified person in any role at the budget that you have to pay for them with the total compensation that you have, I'd be shocked. We pretty much have, I'll just say in the past 10 years, but probably always, we've always had a shortage of skills because technology keeps changing and the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we need continue to change every single day, it seems like lately, especially with AI. So, having the lack of knowledge, skills, and abilities has always been a struggle for businesses. So keep that in mind, that DEI, DEIA, DEIB, it never overlooked merit. And yes, now affirmative action is gone, so we're back to where we've always been, hiring the best person for the job. And if you choose to be focusing on DEI, adding that in there too. But you still need to make sure they have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the job, that they can meet the performance requirements, the behavior requirements, they have the qualifications or close to the qualifications where you're now going to do the training, and that there's not any bias or systematic barriers in your organization, in your application process, in your interview process. We need to learn how to guide hiring, which means we need to stop and teach managers how to hire legally, whether you're using DEI or not. So, Blake, that's another item we probably need to do a training on, is how to hire people legally and efficiently, which means you have to train managers a little bit on what they cannot ask because it's illegal, but planning for recruiting and hiring is important. If we're just going, yeah, today I'm going to throw out an ad, that's not a plan. So I always tell everybody, pause your job ads. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's treat recruiting as a project. And with a project, guess what you do? You do a project plan and you have project meetings. And then once the plan is all set and dates and deadlines and people are involved, then we launch that project. So recruiting and onboarding and hiring is a project, whether you're focusing on diversity and inclusivity or not. You also need to be taking consideration, DEI in promotions and other opportunities, unfortunately, all the way down to termination, which does happen by choice or not by choice because they're not doing their job. So here's the interesting thing. It seems like the EEOC is coming down hard on DEI, but in 2004, last year, the current Equal Employment Opportunity Commission acting chair, Andrea Lucas, did an interview, a podcast interview, and she suggested 11 ways to diversify your workforce without engaging in unlawful discrimination. So we're not going to have time to go over all of these, but you do have this in your handout.
Mhm.
So I put this PDF together for you, went through the podcast and listened to it on your behalf and made sure that I said these are the 11 items that Andrea Lucas, again, current EEOC acting chair, said last year, this is how you could focus on, diversity and inclusion without violating any law, including the DEI/affirmative action, really the affirmative action that was just thrown out. So it's all about first fixing your job descriptions. And in that recruiting session that we're going to be doing on recruiting and hiring, I'll teach you how to do the right job descriptions in there, all the way down to getting your interview questions right, standardizing interviews. We can go over a lot of this in that future training. And then I'll talk about a little bit more, such as supporting first generation professionals who may not ever have gone to college, or they have gone to college, but they're the first generation, so they don't know how to act or behave. And the final one that I like that she said was to fix the workaholic culture in leadership. And that's something that's been, needed to be changed for a very long time. So listen and check out the website for soon to be announced additional deep dive trainings on DEI, DEIA and B, and then on recruiting, hiring, and onboarding the right way so that we can still have inclusive organization where people feel that they belong. People feel that I'm part of the team here. I'm included in conversations. They hired me for my brain, and they're actually including me in that in addition to my regular responsibilities. So my advice also moving forward, which we'll talk about in the training coming up on a deeper dive, is about considering using E-Verify as well as a rapid response team if ICE comes into your organization for either an audit or a raid, and there's a difference between those two. There has been an updated I-9 form that just came out. If you're using the old form, you're still okay. It's good until I think 2027. The new form just changed a few terminology in there. But if you want to use the right form, just do a search for the most recent I-9 form in, I think it was March 2025. It could have been April. Title VII, again, discrimination laws, they still are currently the law. They cannot be changed by an executive order. And as you can see by some of the statistics that I've given you today, and I have a ton more, by the way, that diversity, inclusivity, accessibility, and belonging are positively good for business. If the E scares you, just remove the E part. But if you've already been focusing a lot on equity or equality, that may be a reason why employees flock to your business. So if you're removing that, you might be damaging your brand with your current employees.
Mhm.
So again, DEI can still exist. Just be consistent no matter what. Be consistent, because if you're not being consistent, that's what gets us in trouble and that's what gets us sued. So with that said, I'm happy to stick around if there are any questions. Otherwise,
Okay.
you could shoot me an email too if you're listening to this after the fact.
One question is, will they be recording this meeting? Yes. So you'll get a recording of this. Zoom should send you a link. Also, we've got this available on LinkedIn, so you can watch it there. And the resources here are downloadable right now. So if you go to the resources button at the bottom, you'll see it and you can download the PDF.
Yeah, so you'll get a
Um,
PDF of the PowerPoint, and then you'll get this PDF as well of the 11 ways to diversify your workforce without engaging in unlawful discrimination per the EEOC.
Question is, for a non-government entity, can we still include DEI in our employee handbooks?
Yes, absolutely. DEI is not illegal, never has been illegal. It's not even the words DEI don't even exist anywhere in any employment law. It doesn't even, when it was announced for affirmative action, there's no explanation of what DEI is anywhere. So, yes, you could 100% keep that in there. But people may be wondering what equity means. I think most people get diversity and inclusivity, but many people think of it as reverse discrimination. Hint, there is no such thing as reverse discrimination, but you may need to do some education on discrimination and harassment and diversity and inclusion for yourself, first of all, which we'll be doing shortly in the next couple weeks. But then you may need it and also do it for your team so everybody understands. And the last thing that I would just say is I would consider, again, overhauling your onboarding process, not just your recruiting process, but your onboarding process. So you do spread that out over not just one day, but a couple weeks, and slowly start training people, new hires on your culture so they know what to expect. And some of this terminology might be brand new to them and they're too embarrassed to ask. I'd probably be too embarrassed to ask. Okay, if you met me, I wouldn't be, but other people might be.
Awesome. A couple more questions. What is the best way for practitioners to stay up to date with accurate changes in DEI?
So the biggest thing that I would say is, hey, follow me on LinkedIn because the minute that I find out, I will be sharing that information. But a little hint here: how I find out is I'm signed up to a bunch of my friends' newsletters that are employment lawyers across the United States. So every time I get a new client, I'm an HR consultant in a new state. I find a lawyer in that state to follow, and I make sure it's an employment lawyer that has a newsletter and is active on LinkedIn. And that way, if something in that specific state changes, I'm on LinkedIn every morning. I'm probably on there 3 times a week or 3 times a day. And just follow an employment attorney in your right in, and just make sure it's one that does send out, is active either on LinkedIn or sends out newsletters, because then you don't have to be a lawyer, right? You can just go through it and read it and go, okay, now I understand that. Now I'm going to go ahead and explain it to my team.
Awesome. Um, okay, well, that's all the questions. Thank you very much for joining us here on our free webinar for career learning. Wendy, we will have that course available. If you look her up, you can still get 20% off of everything she's done with the code professional20. So thank you guys, and we will be back next week. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you very much, Wendy. That was terrific.